Hi, I'm Doug Bryant, designer of Dunkirk, France 1940 from Worthington Publishing. In this video I'm going to go over a few odds and ends from the game just to demonstrate some of the mechanics, some different aspects of the use of cards, some different processes. Also, a couple tips and pointers from ways you might want to approach the different forces and ways to utilize some aspects of them. So what I want to first begin with is the fortress here in Belgium. And again, I'm shooting this from a wide angle, so I won't be zooming in per se on the exact hex or the blocks, but you have your copy of the game, you'll kind of know where I'm at and the blocks to which I'm referring. So right down here is the fortress, Evenemel. And at start, the Belgians have to place one block in each of their cities, and of course one block in the fortress, and only one block can ever go in the fortress. Obviously the Belgians are all infantry. In addition, only infantry can enter that hex on the attack for the Germans. Now the Germans can put 2 blocks into that hex to attack it, but they must be infantry. So there's various ways to get to the fort. Sometimes you come through Liège and hit by ground. Sometimes you come across this way from this side. There's various ways to attack the fortress, but the fortress defense effects are pretty stout, as you know from the terrain effects chart. Now the question comes up, how long are those effects in play? Well, they're in play until such time as the Germans would play the paratroop card. And what that means is that the effects are in effect. For example, if the Germans attacked, let's suppose they attacked and the battle went on and they wanted to, maybe Germans lost a couple steps, 2-3 steps, the Belgians lost a step, Germans might want to play a press the attack event, or they might want to spend 2 supreme headquarters points to buy another round of battle. Are the effects still in play for that second round of battle? Yes, they are. They're in effect until such time as the paratroop card is played. Now if the German has the paratroop card, I'm going to hold that up to the camera here for you. Hopefully the camera will pick that up. If they play paratroops, which they would do of course before a first round of battle, because you can only play an event at the start of an activation or a battle card at the start of the battle. In this case it's an event for the formation. If they played that, you treat it as a city. You treat Evenemel as a city, and you negate any of the fortress effects. Now if let's take a situation, the Germans come over a bridge, for example. One of them comes over a bridge. They also play paratroops. It's never been attacked before. You would treat it as a bridge assault into a city, a bridge attack into a city. So that's important to remember. Also, as I mentioned, keep in mind, you can only play one event card for the formation for the activation. So you cannot play paratroops, and then you didn't knock out the fortress, or this could happen anywhere else on the board. You can't play an event. And then, gee, I think I'll play a press the attack event, because the Germans have some of those, but you've already played an event. For example, if you played pontoon bridges or engineers or something like that, a formation-wide event, only play one per activation, so you couldn't then later in that turn buy another round of battle with a press the attack event, because that's not allowed. You'd have to, if you wanted a second round of battle there, you'd have to do it by purchasing it with the Supreme Headquarters. So that's kind of how the fortress works. Just a general reminder about the neutrals, the Dutch and the Belgians. They can never leave their country. So the Belgian bloc could never, for example, come into here, into the Netherlands. It could never go into France, and vice versa. The Dutch could never leave, for example, out of Rotterdam and then come there into Belgian territory. Not allowed. Similarly, keep in mind that the Allies cannot enter, and they never really get to the Netherlands. I've never seen them get there, but they can never enter Belgium, for example, or the Netherlands, but they can never enter Belgium until the Germans have violated neutrality. And that comes into play because sometimes if the German selects Army Group B as the first formation to activate for Germany to start the game, they might not violate Belgian neutrality. And in which case you might get the next trip may be, for example, the French Ninth. Well, they can't go into Belgium. They're going to have to set up a defensive perimeter in French territory, so on and so forth. A couple other things about the setup areas. Obviously, the German setup areas, the Allies can never, no blocks can ever come into there. Similarly, the Army Group B blocks cannot go into A setup area or vice versa. You can do a thing like activate A and then have B swinging behind them by moving through the Army Group A setup area. Not allowed. They have to move forward into the field of play. Next thing I want to point out to you is some things about the BEF. I'm just going to move our neutral blocks out of here for a moment. And let's just take a look at the BEF. Up here I just have 3 of the blocks for the demonstration. Specifically, I want to talk about the Dynamo card, review that with you. Put that up here for you. Dynamo, the evacuation. Players are sometimes asked specifically, exactly how do we do this? Well, let me demonstrate. Anytime after a turn 4 or later, on the BEF activation, the Allied player may, if desired, evacuate the BEF by simply moving the blocks into Dunkirk or Calais and taking them off the board. Could they be in battle and disengage? Yes, they could. 1, 2, 3, off they go. And so on. This fellow might have to go here. Oh, well, you mean they don't all have to activate or depart the same activation? That's correct, they don't. You might not be able to get them all to the evacuation ports on the activation in which you play the dynamo card, but perhaps the next turn on that activation, you could, if they're able to get there, evacuate them that way. Well, here, Doug, here's a question. Suppose they're engaged in battle in a port hex. Could I play the card? Well, yeah, you evacuate them right there. Kind of historical. So, that's how you use the dynamo card. And again, the decision whether or not to evacuate the BEF is a challenging one for the Allied player, but that's how you would make use of that card. A couple other pointers about the BEF that I should mention. As you know, when you read through the rules, BEF blocks, if eliminated, do not come back. They never come back into play. And that's significant because you want to make sure that you never lose your BEF headquarters. If you lose that headquarters block, the other blocks of the formation are going to be out of command for the balance of the game. So it's important, also important as well to note that some of the cards have reinforcements. There's some that are specified BEF only because the other reinforcements rather are only for the French blocks. BEF steps only come back into play via those specific BEF reinforcement cards, and there's not many of them. So you got to be very careful with the BEF because again they're not in their home country, and it's hard for them to get reinforcements. Next thing I want to point out is a couple things in terms of the pontoon bridge and the river cards. What I'm going to do here, I'm just going to set up a little situation here. Let's just take a couple French blocks. Let's say they're in here. Pontoon bridges, just to explain and the differences and how they're used in comparison with the engineer block. The pontoon bridges basically take river hex sides and treat them as if there is a bridge. So anything where there's not a bridge, you treat it as if it's a bridge, meaning it costs 1 movement point to cross instead of 2. That's the cost. And also the defender then is entitled to bridge defense effects. At least one block I should say, of the defenders gets to roll an extra die. So that's how pontoon bridges come into play. And remember, that's a formation-wide event. So you cannot also then play another formation-wide event on that activation. Engineers is a bit different. Engineers is a very powerful card. I'm going to demonstrate something for you here. First, let's look at how Engineers is worded. And hopefully we can get some focus on there. If we touch that up a bit. Okay, river and our bridge defense effects are negated for new battles initiated by the active formation. This activation only. River cost is still 2 movement points. So what this does in effect, and what I mean by that phrase, new battles, I mean a situation where it's not a battle that has been going on. Let's just... the moment. It's not a battle that's been going on where, okay, on Army Group A's activation now, we've already crossed the river. I'm going to pull this block out because it got chewed up, and I'm going to bring another block in. At that point, the river effects are done. They've got their beachhead, so to speak, their crossing point. I'm talking about situations when I say new battles where the attacker first moves into a hex where there's no other friendly blocks engaged. So let's take a look here in this situation of how engineers would work. Now, if you look here, this is that little bend below Charleroi here where the Germans are going to come out of the Ardennes. And let's say we have 2 French blocks here. Here's an infantry block. He's going to cross for 2. This armor block is going to go 1, 2, 3. Okay, now normally that's going to be a river assault. And it's going to entitle both those French blocks to an extra die. However, the German player at the start of the activation declared, I'm playing Engineer. So it's a very powerful card because it does not negate the cost, the physical act of crossing the river. It's still 2 points, but what it does is it takes away those river defense effects, and instead you fight that battle based on the terrain in the hex. If it's a city, you treat it as a city, a forest, etc. In this case, it's clear, and the implications are significant because in my example, I have the Germans with an armor block, and there's 2 French infantry blocks. In that case, the German armor will fire first. In clear terrain, also any kind of airstrike would not suffer any penalties from city forests, etc. Not that it would in any case, but you have that possibility to treat that as a clear hex because you're negating any river effects. And again, the airstrikes, etc., they aren't so much affected by the river, but just as they would monitor and look at the terrain to determine their value, in this case, when you have the engineer card played, the blocks will look at the terrain in the hex, not the fact that a river was crossed, because it wipes that consideration off. So again, engineers, a very powerful card, and that's how you do that. While we're on the topic of a battle, let's just take a look again to review the battle process. So this question has come up at different times. So again, let's ignore the terrain for the moment. I'm just picking some hexes here to use. Let's assume the German is the active formation and they move in to attack. Okay, there's one, there's two. So we complete all our movement for the formation. So at the end of movement, okay, we got some potential battles here. What do? The active player selects the sequence in which those battles will be conducted and might say, okay, we'll start here. So both players will reveal the blocks at their current strength at that time. And at that point, players can decide whether or not to play a battle card. It's not like you have to guess. Gee, I'm going to play an airstrike not knowing what's in there. I'm going to play an airstrike negation for the Allies without knowing whether, you know. What happens is you see what's in there, and the sequence for battle card declaration is that the active player declares first. So in our example, the German player would declare, and that's important because let's just take, for example, suppose they had this battle card here they wanted to play. Airstrike 55, 2 dice at 5 or less. Okay, the active player declares first, I'm going to play an airstrike 2 at 5. The allied player can then respond, I'm not going to play any battle card, maybe I don't have one, maybe I have one I'm saving for later. Don't want to play anything, or they might. I'm going to play an airstrike 3 at 4. Okay, in that case, we simultaneously roll the airstrike artillery strike phase. Hits are applied. Remember, airstrike artillery strike cannot remove a block, but can knock it down to 1 step. But we do that, and then we fight the battle with the blocks based on the sequence in the terrain effects chart. But suppose the the Allies had rather a negation card. This one based on the French Air Force. There's also some named after the RAF. They're used interchangeably for the Allies. But the reason the sequence is important is because in this case, the German player being active declares an airstrike. The Allied player can say, I'm going to play my counter, my negation card. The airstrike is wiped out, and that's how you go. So therefore, the Allied player has to have a chance to see if there's actually an airstrike being played. Similarly, let's look at another situation. Let's consider the German card Blitzkrieg, the Blitzkrieg card, which here's the wording for it. All blocks, all the active formation blocks fire first. One must be an armor block, but there's a note at the bottom of I got the counterstrike card. So let's say the German says, as the active, I'm going to play my Blitzkrieg card. Well, the Allied player may have the counterstrike card, and the counterstrike card, if we get into focus for us there, negates this card. Now again, the Allied player would not play this on their own because they're waiting to see what the active player is doing. It's a response card. They play that. If they had played Blitzkrieg, they played counterstrike. They're both negated. Suppose the German played the airstrike. The Allied player could then play counterstrike, in which case after the airstrike artillery strike portion, the Allied player, all his blocks would fire, his or her blocks would fire first in the round. So that's how that sequence of when the cards are played. It's always the active player, i.e. the attacker, who declares first for a battle card, and then the non-active player. Now, one thing to remember is that you can play one battle card per battle. So if a second round of battle was purchased here, you don't play another battle card in there. If you didn't play a battle card in the first round, you can't play one in the second round. You have to play it off the bat. But you can play battle cards in multiple battles during an activation. The difference between events and battle cards: one event for the formation, for the activation, covers the whole formation. Battle cards, you can play multiple battle cards if you have them and want to use them in multiple hexes during the formation's activation. So let's look at a couple other situations here. Let's take a look over in this section here, and we're going to have, this kind of falls into the realm of tips and tricks, if you will. First, let's look at these two blocks here. These are the two German Army Group A tank blocks, the one that have 3 steps at max value, 3 steps at 5 or less. Those are very powerful, and just a little tip and caution here, it can become almost too much fun having those 2 blocks at full strength roaming the French countryside destroying blue blocks, because they can basically vaporize some things. You toss an airstrike in with them, and I literally have seen 6 steps worth of French infantry just disappear in a turn because they get hit with an airstrike. They get hit with two of these blocks at maxed out. Now the wrinkle is, though, there's a downside to this, and what I'm advising, it might be a better thing to do, is instead of putting those 2 blocks together, it's always good to have maybe an infantry block or maybe a mechanized block with them to absorb some hits, and here's why. Let's picture a situation. I'll just grab an infantry block here. Okay, they move in. Aha, we're gonna take care of you. We have 6 steps of armor at 5 or less. Maybe we even play the Panzer Blitz card on top of that. which lets us roll an extra die, so we have 7 dice at 5 or less. Well, that's all well and good, but the Allies do have some airstrikes as well. And suppose they have this one, for example. This is Allied player card number 1, with their most powerful airstrike, 3 of 4. Air and artillery strikes happen before the ground battle with the blocks. Those German tank blocks are out there in the clear. Nothing to protect them from the airstrike. Allied player could potentially get 3 hits on them and really chew them up. And as you know, if you played the game, you know that the German armor blocks are few in number. They're very powerful, but they're very valuable. They're also very brittle because they don't come back into play if they're eliminated, and there are very few German armor reinforcement steps in the card deck for them. So that's a situation you want to be mindful of. Always better to pair them up with something, in my opinion. Another little tactic that some players do, especially the Allies, is, as you know, the Allied formation, any formation headquarters block that is eliminated through the first 5 turns comes back, or the first 4 turns, I should say, comes back the next turn, start of the next turn, at 2 steps. So what some players will do, for example, here's the headquarters for the first army group. They will put that in front of. I mean, a lot of players tend to put the headquarters either equal with or in back of their formations box to protect it, to shield it. They'll sometimes put it in front as a speed bump, and the German will have to hit that. Maybe they knock it out. Okay, well, we'll put it on the turn track. Let's say this was turn 3. We'll put it on turn 4. We'll get it back. Start of turn 4. We'll just put it back here at that point, but we slowed them up a hex. It's an interesting tactic to use for the Allies. The downside is that you got to make sure when you use it and why you're using that kind of tactic, because from the moment that after the activation of which that headquarters is out of play, for the balance of the game turn until it comes back into play, its blocks are out of command and suffer those significant combat penalties. Also keep in mind that any headquarters block eliminated on turn 5 does not come back, and I put that rule in there because it prevents the Allied player from on turn 6 just, okay, I'm just going to toss a couple of one-step headquarters, bring them back into play, to deny the German the chance to wipe out a formation. If it didn't have it in there, it could be almost impossible for the Germans to ever wipe out a formation completely. So if you lose your formation headquarters on turn 5, it's gone. Now, question also comes up. Let's go back to this example. Let's suppose the headquarters is engaged here, and I don't know, I'm just going to pick a couple blocks here. There's a battle over here. Players have asked sometimes, okay, well, if this headquarters block is eliminated in a battle during this activation, but we haven't fought all the battles yet, when we go over and fight this one on the same activation, we just, okay, that's done, let's move down 2 hexes, finish this battle up. Are those blocks out of command now? And the answer is no. They don't instantaneously go out of command. They go out of command at the start of the next activation, because these battles would be considered to be happening simultaneously. So that's a situation where they aren't out of command instantly, but rather the next activation they would be out of command and suffer those effects because their headquarters is out of play. A couple other things on some cards I want to point out about the 2 very powerful Allied cards. The twin troubles for the German player, the mines card and the fuel shortage card. Keep in mind they're very strong, but the way they are used is only once per game, not on turn 1. And once they are used, you physically give the card to the German player as a mnemonic, as a reminder that that you can't do this to me again. I have seen games where, for example, I just had a game recently where my opponent on turn 2, Army Group A was getting ready to move, and on their first activation, as you know, the A and B groups get 2 activations the first 2 game turns. First activation for A, he played mines on me. I said, well, gee, thanks, that's nice. And then next activation, same game turn, he said, well, here's a fuel shortage for you as well. I said, I thought we were friends. But it was very annoying, but it's something you have to fight through as the Germans at times, and that's an effective play for the Allies. But again, 1 per game, and that's just all you can do with those things. What I want to finish up with here for you is the explanation of how the sequence at the end of a turn goes, and that's dealing specifically with the Supreme Headquarters, with reinforcements, with reserves. So let's take a look here. Let's say we fought the battles. Let's say, let's face up. The French, the Allies have held that hex and so on. So now all the command chits have been drawn. We've done all the movement, all the battles. And now at this point, what we're going to do is we enter the reinforcements and reserves phase. I'll talk about the free step to finish up here in just a moment, but let me first just deal with the sequence of reinforcements and then reserves. Reinforcements come in off of reinforcement cards on the player cards. And that says 3 infantry steps for the French. So you only play 1 reinforcement card at the end of the turn. You can't play multiples of those. Yeah, of course, you may not have any sometimes. That happens too. But the reinforcement steps go on first, and they go on to blocks that are on the board, not in combat, and are in command. So this block here could not receive, for either side, either of those blocks could not receive a reinforcement step because they're engaged in battle. But let's suppose this fella here, for the Germans, let's suppose they had I don't know, here's one, 2 infantry steps for the Germans, okay? They could, and I'll pop another block on for the demonstration purposes. Let's say they're in command, they're not in battle. I could put the 2 steps on 1 block, because the most any block can receive is 2 steps of reinforcement. I could put 1 here and 1 here. I could have an Army Group B and Army Group A. Each, I can use them across formations. An infantry block from B and infantry block from A. They both get 1. That sort of thing. They just cannot be in battle, and they must be in command. Now, the wrinkle to keep in mind is that the Supreme Headquarters never adds steps to a block on the board. The reinforcement block, the Supreme Headquarters block never adds reinforcement steps to blocks on the board. The only way that blocks in play get reinforcements is via the play of a reinforcement card at the end of a turn. Again, you can only play 1. After any reinforcement, if you have the cards and if you want to use them, is done, after you have any reinforcement card, you've played it, you added your step or steps. If you've played a reinforcement card or not, when you get through that phase, we enter what's called the reserve phase. And that's where you bring eliminated blocks back into play. And that's where the Supreme comes out. And I'm using the Germans, the same for the Allies as well. 1 step per point, per block step. And you can bring blocks in at a maximum of 2 steps. So if I had, let's say, a maxed out Supreme Headquarters, I could spend 2 blocks and bring this fella in at 2 steps. He has to be within command range of the headquarters. Let's say that's the headquarters. He could be in the hex with him if there's room. He has to be within command range. 3 for the Germans, 2 for the Allies. No further advanced than the headquarters, and that's the same for the Allies as well. If the formation headquarters was here, the block could not, deploy forward of that. And they come back into play. Can I burn all 4 steps and put it face down? Yes, I can. I could bring another guy in. I could bring 4 in at 1, 2 at 2, 1 at 3, or 1 at 2, 1 at 1, 1 at 1. I can bring in 3 blocks that way. I can do whatever I want in terms of bringing blocks in. And this is a very important tool for the Allied player to do, because sometimes you got to plug some holes. So I can do that and bring them back in, and then they're back in play. So again, reinforcement step first, which is steps added to blocks in play, not in battle, in command. And then the reserves. Now, why is it in that sequence? Because what we didn't want, here's why I did that. What I didn't want is, okay, I'm going to bring this block in at 2 steps with 2 Supreme Headquarters points. I'm now going to play a reinforcement thing on it and put it up another step to 3. No. Reinforcement first was on the board. Reserve second, bringing blocks back in. They can't be increased more than 2 that they got from the Supreme Headquarters. Now, about that free Supreme Headquarters point, I put in an option as to when you take that point. It could have been, it's always at the end of the turn, could have been prior to the start of the reinforcement and reserve sequence, or it could have been after you're done with that. Question is why? Alright, let's suppose I spent a point to strat move somebody during the game turn. I'm at 3 points of my Supreme. We come into the reinforcements reserves phase. Yeah, I'll take my free step. I'm back at 4. I'm going to spend 3 of those and bring 3 guys in back at 1 step. Wonderful, wonderful. I didn't play a reinforcement card. I did. It doesn't matter. I've done my reinforcement thing. I sent 3 to bring guys back in. Okay, I got my free step already, so I'm going to be at 1 going into the next turn. Okay, that's all well and good. Suppose, though, I hadn't spent anything, or I was maxed out at 4. If I take my free step now, I'm going to lose it, because I can't be more than 4. So I don't have to take it at the start of the reinforcement reserve phase. I could do this. Okay, I'm at 4. I'm going to hang on to my free step for a moment. I'm going to play a reinforcement card on this fellow over here on the Ardennes. I'm going to put an infantry step on him or what have you. I'm going to now spend 3 of my points and bring 3 blocks back in at 1 step each. Okay, they're command with command. Now, because I'm down to 1, I'm going to take my free step, so I'll go into the next turn at 2. I put that flexibility in because if you enter this end of turn reinforcement reserve sequence with your Supreme already maxed out, you'd waste it otherwise. So you can spend yourself down during that phase, bringing blocks back in and picking back up. One other thing about strategic movement, since I mentioned it, keep in mind it's a very powerful tool. The BEF can never be moved by strat move by the Allied headquarters. That's to sort of simulate some command friction between the French and British. Similarly, the Germans cannot strap move blocks out of their startup areas. They have to at least have first entered the field of play, and they can't strap move out of here. It's almost like they're getting a slingshot off the from the catapult on an aircraft carrier or something. Kind of springs them forward too much right off the bat, and that's a little bit unbalanced. So the block has to at least have been in the field of play on a previous activation before being able to be strap moved. With the spring block, of course, strap moves, you ignore terrain. You just can't go capture cities and things with it, but you can move up to 4 hexes that way using supreme move. So I hope those things have been helpful for you to explain some of the little odds and ends about the game. I hope you enjoy the game, and it's I tried to put a lot of decisions in there for both sides, and just to hope this video will help increase your enjoyment of playing Dunkirk, France 1940. Thanks so very much. Take care.